Perfect. And I see the congressman on, so I am going to go ahead and mute myself and have both of you continue your conversation.
Hi, Lori. How are you?
Hello, how are you?
Doing all right. Thought we'd have a little discussion on trade as we often do, and certainly given yesterday's news, I'll tee it up. You're the trade expert here, and for folks who might be watching, Lori's been at this a long time, fighting for better trade that's better for our workers, for all of us who buy things. That's all of us. And look, and I'll say this: I'm from Western Pennsylvania. I'm from steel country. I think what we've seen out of our government for a long time was a bad deal for all of us, right? It was a race to the bottom on the weakest worker protections and environmental rules. And we saw our manufacturing die, nearly die, get so close in so many sectors. So we got to do something different. And that's maybe a good segue, Lori. The president's announcements yesterday. What do you think? What's your reaction? Where are just I'll give it over to you. Tell us what you see, what you saw out of the White House yesterday.
I see it serve as the good news in this story was the status quo trade regime has been so devastating for so many people, so many communities. Working people in the 90,000 factories we've seen close down just in the last 30 years since the NAFTA and the WTO under this boneheaded trade system. But family farmers, I mean, we now have a food trade deficit. We import the food we're eating, and we have for the last 6 years. We just have the most broken, imbalanced trade system. So on the upside, what we saw yesterday was basically something that was definitely commensurate with this sucks, we can't live with it. How they went about it, so that's sort of the right proportion of what you ought to do. We can't have the status quo continuing. How they went about it, I think it remains to be seen whether they're going to get the kind of outcomes you and I would want, which is like rebuilding manufacturing and making sure there isn't price gouging. So some things just to flag. The countries that they're targeting are not necessarily all the right ones who are the biggest problem. So the question with this kind of a move is downsides and upsides. How do you minimize the downsides and maximize the upsides? I don't know if they're targeting right. There is a big problem about predictability. So they've put tariffs on, they've taken tariffs off, they've done the hokey pokey. No one knows if you should invest or not invest. And so they're going to have to keep these tariffs in place. If they start changing it right away in a week or two, we're not going to get any of the investment to have more manufacturing. Another thing that's a big question is, are they going to do the other stuff you need to have this work? So it's not going to be good for working people if on one hand, you're trying to do protection to try and get new manufacturing, but on the other hand, you're not doing any of the industrial policies. You need to actually drive investment into getting more factories. Like having a tariff is not going to build a new factory.
Let's talk about that, because I am so often making the point that, look, tariffs are a tool. You can misuse them or you can use them well. And in my mind, to use tariffs well, number one, you got to be focused on the offenders, the trade cheats. Communist China is top of that list for me. You got to have the right approach sector by sector. And as you say, it's got to be paired with industrial policies, pro-worker policies. So I get this, I believe this, but tell us more. What are some of those policies that you got to do alongside smart and strategic tariffs, which again, yesterday, much broader than that on the tariff front. But let's assume we're talking in a world where you've got some good, smart, strategic tariffs on China, for instance. What do you also need to see paired with it at home?
So this is the thing that makes me really worried. Trump has announced he's going to try and kill the funding that is going towards supporting construction of new manufacturing plants under things like the Chips and Sciences Act, which was to try and get microchips being made here. The Inflation Reduction Act had money to basically spur private investors to come in and build new factories to make things like EVs in the US or solar panels. All of that kind of money helps drive in private money. It's tax credits if you invest. Similarly, you need on the demand side, creating demand for this new American made stuff. So he wants to kill the tax credit for us consumers to have, you get a better deal if you get American made solar panels or if you get an American made EV. Very smart. You actually drive demand to buy the stuff. You want the investors who get a tax credit, that you have the tariff to protect the little piece of the market. So everyone's not getting just squashulated by unfair Chinese imports. That combo is how you actually have success, as compared to one-off, any one piece of that alone, probably not going to get what you want. And then they're doing all this union busting. So what is their theory of the case of how it's good for U.S. workers, even if they got the factories, if it's going to be like crap wages because they're destroying the NLRB and otherwise busting unions?
Well, and that goes to the wage problem and the wage suppression we see in a lot of countries. That's central to why Wall Street wants to chase the cheapest and weakest labor rules or environmental rules. And I talk about this around Mexico in particular. Unless we address wage suppression in Mexico, tariffs cannot alone fix that imbalance. It will always be, there'll be this big, nasty incentive to rely on underpaid Mexican workers to undercut American ones. What do we do about that?
Well, I saw that you joined a letter with 60 of your other colleagues, basically calling for the renegotiation of the NAFTA 2.0, which is not, it was better than NAFTA, but it's not fixed the problem. And so you and a lot of other people are rightly saying that needs a major redo so that we actually have wages lifted up. I mean, if you talk to folks at the UAW, they'll tell you about the kind of price gouging we also, by the way, need to be fighting against in this situation because, like everyone's seen, the price of cars have gone up. Like if you actually know the stats, which I heard from the UAW guys, which was shocking, in the last 3 years, 30% increase in the average price of a US car. However, a bunch of these producers have actually removed the factories from the US where, a UAW worker's making $30, $35 an hour, and they've sent it to Mexico where the same guys and gals in the same fancy plants are making, so help me God, $3 or $4 an hour. They're making so much money. The profit margin is enormous. Did they bring down the price of the car? No, they actually raised the price of the car, which is price gouging. And that kind of maneuver, where basically the workers get screwed and the consumers get screwed, is what we have to make sure does not happen with these new tariffs.
Yeah. And so look, I think the president has tools at his disposal that I've seen no willingness to use on this front, right, to fight against price gouging. What should we expect or what should we be pushing the administration to do when we see this kind of price gouging under the cover of tariffs?
So the good news is there is a statute that's called the Federal Trade Commission Act. It's not about trade like we're talking about now. It means domestic trade. So it's the agency that's about cheating in the marketplace domestically. And they have two kinds of authority under what, if you want to read it along at home, 6B of the statute of the FTC Act. And that is one, they have the authority to surveil prices. So any US company can be asked by them to show why they're marking things up. What's the cost of the good at the wholesale level? What are you charging people? That's a way to make sure price gouging, which is defined as raising prices more than your cost going up. So like if a tariff increases the wholesale price by 5 cents, but you charge $5 more, that's price gouging. And then under the Deceptive Practices and Acts part of the statute, the FTC has existing authority to sanction basically a fine or other action against a company that does that thing and screws consumers. So what we're doing is we are basically demanding that President Trump call on this independent agency to use its existing authority to do that and to do it right now today. Because we've seen all of these corporates earnings calls where the companies are saying things like, whoa, there could be tariffs in the future. Let's raise prices. Wink, wink. And they're going to do it whether or not the price goes up for the tariff.
Yeah. Well, look, we don't have all day, and I could do this with you all day, talking about what we can do to juice American jobs and manufacturing. And I'll leave with one teaser, though, related to the point you're making on price gouging. Of course, to me, is about strong antitrust enforcement, where you have more competition, right? You don't have that same power from a company to just jack up prices if they're worried about their competitors undercutting, which we want in American capitalism. You got to have competitive markets. That may be a good segue for maybe another related chat. But Lori, thanks for coming on. We got to get this right for American workers and American consumers and American jobs. And hopefully this tide is turning.
Thank you, Congressman Chris Deluzio, for asking me to have a chat with you. You are one of the few people, breath of fresh air, who is in those halls in Congress, making sure people understand what is actually going on in communities across the country, why people are insisting on this kind of change. And you give a lot of people hope with your leadership to make clear there's a different way to do this that actually can make us as a whole country more resilient, more united. And there's a way forward. We need to break these old bad rules. And then together, you're helping everyone in Congress think about how we ought to do it right. So thank you.
Thanks, Lori.
Thanks, everyone. And please help share Lori and the Congressman's message. We're ending our live now. Have a good day.